As sales professionals, we face countless challenges when selling a product or service. But one of the biggest hurdles we encounter is handling objections. Customers come up with all sorts of excuses and reasons. And sometimes, despite giving our best effort, we just can't convince them. And when that happens, no sales, no targets met. It leads to demotivation, loss of confidence, and even a loss of interest in selling altogether.
This is the story of so many people I know. But here's the big question. How can we improve ourselves and convince our customers? Is it even possible? Hi, I'm Chuman, a lifelong learner. And today, we're joined by someone who's here to answer these questions. Meet Yukti, who's going to guide us through overcoming these challenges and winning over customers. Good morning, madam.
Good morning, Chuman. You're absolutely right. So many people are drawn to a career in sales because of its amazing benefits, high earnings, fast-paced career growth, and flexibility. They step into this profession with big dreams and aspirations, ready to take on the world. But here's where it gets tough. When they struggle to handle objections, selling starts to feel overwhelming and difficult. Now, let me clarify. I'm not saying sales is easy. It's definitely challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding and interesting. The truth is, once you understand the process and learn how to navigate it, the whole experience becomes a lot less intimidating and much more manageable.
I couldn't agree more, madam. Once we know how something is done, it feels a lot easier. And I'm curious to learn, how can we handle these objections?
Of course, Chuman, I'll tell you how. But before we dive into the how, we need to first understand the what and the why.
Yes, absolutely. Let's start there.
All right, Chuman, let's start with understanding what an objection is. Think about a typical day in the life of a Gen Z individual. You wake up and decide to ask your parents if you can hang out with your friends in the evening. What's the first thing they say? Why do you need to go out? Stay home and study. That's your first objection for the day. Then you call your best friend to plan the meetup, and they say, "Gosh, I'm too tired. Let's do it next weekend." Another objection. Finally, you convince everyone, get dressed, and head out. You're about to take an auto or cab, and the driver tells you, "No UPI, only cash." See, that's 3 objections already, and the day hasn't even started properly.
Wow, Yukti, madam. When you put it like that, objections really are everywhere.
Exactly, Chuman. And why do these objections happen? Because people have reasons to hesitate or resist. Your parents want you to focus on your studies. They're thinking about your future. Your friend is tired. They're prioritizing rest. And the driver? Well, maybe he doesn't trust digital payments or has faced issues with them. Objections are just people expressing their concerns or doubts, and that's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to address those concerns. Now let's shift this to sales. Imagine you're trying to sell a product, and the customer says something like, "This is too expensive." Or maybe they say, "I already have something similar." And then, of course, there's the classic, "I'll think about it." Sounds familiar, right? These are all objections, but why do they happen? For the same reason. They have doubts or fears. Maybe they don't see the value in your product. Maybe they're comparing it to a competitor. Or maybe they're just unsure if they need it at all.
That's so true. So objections aren't rejections. They're just doubts or concern.
Exactly. And here's the good news. Once you understand why objections happen, you can address them. Objections give you a chance to explain your product better, build trust, and even strengthen your relationship with the customer. But before we get to how to handle them, it's important to first recognize and respect the customer's perspective. When someone raises an objection, it's not about you. It's about them and their needs.
I love that perspective, Yukti, madam. So objections are opportunities in disguise?
Exactly, Chuman. Objections are opportunities to understand your customer better and show them why your solution fits their needs. Once we start seeing objections this way, they stop being roadblocks and start being stepping stones. But here's the catch. If objections aren't handled, the results are clear. No sales, missed targets, and frustration. Over time, this can lead to demotivation, a loss of confidence, and even thoughts of quitting the profession.
That's a tough reality, madam. But it really highlights how important it is to learn how to handle objections.
Absolutely, Chuman. And here's something important to remember. Even with the best techniques and practices, you won't be able to convince every customer. Let's say 10 customers come to you with objections. Before learning these steps, you might have managed to convert 2 out of 10. But by learning, practicing, and applying these techniques, you could increase that number to 6 or 7 closures. It's about improving your conversion ratio.
That makes sense, Yukti madam. So how do we handle these objections effectively?
Great question, Chuman. Let's move to the most exciting part, how to handle objections. I'll break it down step by step so that anyone, regardless of their experience, can use these techniques to improve their sales game. Let's talk about the 3 steps to handle any objection. These are steps I learned long back during my time with a multinational company, and they've stuck with me ever since. The first step is to acknowledge the objection. Let me ask you something, Chuman. What happens if you don't acknowledge an objection? Let's take an example we discussed earlier. Imagine your parents say, "Why do you need to go out? Stay home and study." But you ignore their concern and just keep insisting on going out. What do you think happens?
They'd probably get more frustrated, and I'd lose any chance of convincing them.
Exactly. When you don't acknowledge someone's objection, it feels like you're ignoring their concerns. In sales, that's a sure way to lose trust. Acknowledging an objection is about showing the customer that you've heard them, you understand their concern, and you respect their perspective. It's also about empathy, making them feel valued. A simple response like, "I understand your concern about the price," or "I see why this might feel like a big decision," can immediately ease the tension and open up the conversation. Now, before we move to the second step, let me ask you another question. Chuman, is it possible to find a solution if you don't know the reason for the problem?
No, not at all. You need to know what's causing the problem to fix it.
Exactly, Chuman. That's why identifying the reason behind the objection is part of step 1 itself. When a customer raises an objection, you acknowledge it first to build trust. Then you dig deeper by asking questions to find out what's really bothering them. Asking is a powerful tool in sales. It helps you uncover the real concern. For example, if a customer says, "This is too expensive," you could ask, "What do you mean by expensive? Are you comparing it to something else, or are you unsure about the value it provides?" When you ask, you get clarity. Sometimes what looks like a price objection might actually be a budget constraint, a lack of understanding of the product's value, or even a comparison to a competitor's offering. Identifying the root cause helps you focus your response and address the actual concern. Now, step 2 comes into play. Once you've acknowledged the objection and identified the reason, the next step is to counter the logic with a logic. Let me start with a simple story to explain this. Imagine there was a crow who found a delicious piece of bread. A fox approached and told the crow, "That bread looks dry and tasteless. Why don't you give it to me?" The crow thought for a moment and replied, "If it's so tasteless, why would you want it?" The fox, caught off guard, had no response.
That's a clever crow. So the crow used logic to counter the fox's logic?
Exactly, Chuman. In sales, objections often come from the customer's logic, whether it's about price, timing, or trust. Countering their logic with your own in a way that addresses their concern is the key to overcoming objections. But here's the important part. When countering logic, you have to be careful not to offend the customer. Let me ask you, what do you think happens if you offend a customer while trying to counter their point?
If they're offended, they'll shut down the conversation. You might lose the sale entirely.
Exactly. That's why it's critical to respond in a balanced way, carefully choosing your words, and most importantly, being polite. In step 2, you can use different objection handling techniques to counter logic effectively. Some popular ones are boomerang technique, feel, felt, found, lace technique, chunking up and chunking down techniques, etc. There are many other techniques as well.
I'd love to learn more about these techniques.
Of course, Chuman. Once we go through all the steps, I'll explain each technique in detail. But for now, let's move to the third and final step, confirming whether the objection is resolved. At this stage, it's crucial to confirm whether you've addressed the customer's query or objection. You can do this by asking them directly, like, "Does this answer your concern?" Alternatively, you can use a leading question to check their level of confidence and observe their body language. For example, you might say, Would you like me to explain anything further? Or does this feel clear enough to you? This not only shows your willingness to assist, but also helps you gauge their level of satisfaction. Now, along with asking for confirmation, it's equally important to carefully observe the customer's body language and responses. This will give you clues about whether they're fully convinced, partially convinced, or still have doubts. For instance, if the customer is fully convinced, they might nod, smile, or say something like, "That makes sense," or "I think I'll go for it." If they're partially convinced, they might respond with something like, "I need to think about it," or appear thoughtful but not entirely committed. And if they're not convinced at all, you might notice them frowning, crossing their arms, or even repeating the same objection.
That's really insightful, Madam Yukti. So confirming through both direct questions and observation is the key?
Absolutely. Observing and confirming go hand in hand. When you use both approaches together, you not only address concerns effectively, but also build trust and rapport with your customer.
What do we do if they're still not convinced?
Simple. We go back to step one. Ask politely to understand the reason again, because we might have missed something important. This cycle continues until we're either able to resolve the objection or determine that we can't meet the customer's needs. And here's an important point to remember. Even if we follow all the steps perfectly, there will be times when we can't provide the product or service the customer is looking for.
So we lose the customer in that case?
Not necessarily, Chuman. When you handle objections with patience, professionalism, and respect, you build trust, even if the sale doesn't close. And trust is powerful. It can lead to two great outcomes. First, the customer might come back to you in the future when they need a product or service you offer. Second, they might refer you to someone they know who could benefit from what you're offering. See how handling objections the right way can open doors even when the deal doesn't close.
Absolutely, Yukti Madam. It's amazing how building trust can create opportunities beyond just closing the sale.
That's the power of following a process. It's not just about increasing your conversion rate, though it will do that. It's about building relationships that last.
Got it. This isn't just about closing sales. It's about creating opportunities and building trust.
Exactly. And that's what makes sales a rewarding profession.
Thank you so much, Yukti Madam, for this insightful discussion. It's been an eye-opener to learn about handling objections in sales, and I'm sure our viewers found it just as valuable. Each of the objection handling techniques we mentioned today, like the boomerang technique, lace, and others, will be explored in detail in future episodes, so stay tuned. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your feedback or your learnings in the comments section below. As the saying goes, the faintest ink is better than the strongest memory. Writing down your thoughts helps you remember and apply them more effectively. So let us know what resonated with you the most. To all our viewers out there, if you enjoyed today's episode and feel it's helping you become a better sales professional, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. Until we meet again, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep growing. Take care of your health, and as always, happy selling.
Thank you, Chuman, and thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Remember, sales is not just about closing deals, it's about building trust and relationships. Wishing you all great success in your sales journey. See you next time.